Mr. Torres is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I have just several questions and comments directed toward Ms. Bonilla. One of the persistent causes, one of the root causes of persistent poverty in Puerto Rico is the Insular cases, which to me represents a continuation of Jim Crow. Denouncing the Insular cases as a vestige of Jim Crow is not hyperbole, it's a statement of historical fact. The Supreme Court that gave us Plessy versus Ferguson and the doctrine of separate but equal is the same court that gave us the Insular cases, which imposes second-class status on the U.S. citizens of U.S. territories. There are more than 3 million American citizens of Puerto Rico deprived of equal protection simply because those citizens happen to live in an unincorporated territory, which is a second-class status fabricated by the United States Supreme Court. The term unincorporated territory appears nowhere in the actual text of the Constitution, and yet the self-proclaimed textualist and originalist on the Supreme Court seem to be in no rush to overturn the Insular cases. How telling. As you know, Ms. Bonilla, the Insular cases enable the federal government to discriminate against the American citizens of Puerto Rico. The American citizens of Puerto Rico are excluded from SSI, excluded from SNAP, excluded from their fair share of Medicaid funding, excluded from far too many programs to enumerate. Do you think there's a single state in the United States that could absorb the fiscal shock of losing all of its SSI funding, all of its SNAP funding, and most of its Medicaid funding? Can you think of a single state that could absorb those fiscal shocks?
Obviously not. Obviously not.
So is it reasonable to expect Puerto Rico to suffer fiscal conditions and constraints that not even the wealthiest states like New York or California could survive?
Absolutely not.
And the federal government denies Puerto Rico access to federal programs that are crucial to the fiscal sovereignty of just about every state. Is it fair to say that the United States, by denying the island access to that which is essential, has essentially set up Puerto Rico to fail?
It has set it up to fail, but it has set it up to succeed as a colony, which is what the United States wishes to hold it as, since it's what it continues to replicate in Puerto Rico and in the other U.S. territories.
Do you believe, as I do, that overturning the Insular cases is necessary for the recovery of the island?
Honestly, this might surprise you, but I don't think it's necessary because it is, in fact, just an excuse. I think it would help remove the excuses that the U.S. government uses to keep treating Puerto Rico differently. But the fact is that the U.S. government, the U.S. Congress could begin to treat Puerto Rico differently today. It doesn't have to remove the Insular cases in order to do that. Do I think it's a racist law that brings shame to the U.S. government? Yes, but I don't think it's more than just an excuse for the conditions that are currently in place.
As you might know, the Jones Act is a third rail in American politics. Congress is fiercely protective of the Jones Act, which discriminates against Puerto Rico. What are your thoughts on the disparate impact of the Jones Act on the island?
Without a doubt, the Jones Act brings nothing but increased cost to a place that is experiencing persistent, acute, and systemic poverty across every single one of its counties and municipios. The problem with the Jones Act is that it's not a partisan issue. It does not impact one party or another and has not been taken up by one party or another. But the fact is that the only folks who benefit from the Jones Act are the shipping industry in the United States. And so it does need to be brought into greater scrutiny and questioned and repealed.
Not every state and territory are subject to the Jones Act. Both Puerto Rico and Hawaii have the highest electricity cost in the United States, and both Puerto Rico and Hawaii are subject to the Jones Act. Do you think that's a coincidence?
No, obviously there are folks that are benefiting from the extreme costs that are spent in transporting goods to these places. However, I think it's important to recognize that some folks benefit, but this does not benefit the U.S. economy as a whole, since it actually makes it more expensive for many U.S. businesses to operate in Puerto Rico because of these excessive shipping costs.
My time has expired. Thank you.
Mr. Torres yields back. We have no further witnesses unless Mr. Huizenga from Michigan, he's checked out.